Chapter 6, Southwold, February 2020. The rain is raining all around. It falls on field and tree. It rains on the umbrellas here and on the ships at sea. Those lines are from a poem by Robert Louis Stevenson. It's early February. I'm feeling slightly despondent. The early darkness does not help. No sooner when I awake in the morning than I feel the day already beginning to slip away from me. I walk to the library in the remains of the night and return to Wolfson during its return. Only once in a while does the sun shine through the library's tea-room windows like a spotlight, illuminate the half-empty cups and plates cluttering the tables. In an attempt to elevate their dreary mood, a few people at college purchase sad lights. To make matters worse, I realize that in less than a month, I must leave behind my privileged life in Cambridge and return home to Buffalo to resume a more mundane existence. Or so I thought at the time. I didn't yet know that I, along with others, am soon to be immersed in the irregularities of COVID. No ordinary life awaits us all. Because my remaining time is fast sliding into oblivion, I naturally think of all the things I wish to do before I must pack my bags and surrender my keys. In the course of assembling a list of such desires, an irresistible longing to return to the East Anglia coast and ramble alone by the sea just one more time possesses me. I must find a way. But the weather is not cooperating. Day after day, the rain is raining all around. The cloudbursts never seem to cease. A terse ode to rain I stumble upon in one of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's 18th century notebooks aptly captures my impatience and annoyance. But only now, for this one day, do go, dear rain, do go away. Each evening, I compulsively check the weather report. Just in time, for opportunities are running out, the promise of a clearer patch arises. I seize the moment and book a room at a reasonable hotel in a seaside community 11 miles south of Lowestoft. The destination is Southwold. An acquaintance I cannot remember who suggests the place is worth a visit. But this trip is going to be slightly different. For Southwold, unlike the other East Anglia communities I have visited during the last few months, is no longer connected to a train line. The 3-foot narrow-gauge railroad linking this Suffolk seaside resort to the Great Eastern Main Line closed for good in 1929. Determined, however, to reach Southwold and perhaps be even slightly more adventurous, I pack my rucksack, bid a fond farewell to the college porter, who finally approves of my choice, and start a more intricate and less certain journey than usual. Initially, I take a train to Ipswich and then, after a platform change, board a smaller train to the rural village of Darsham, where a private taxi service will, I trust, meet me and take me the additional 11 miles to Southwold. Finding a service is not easy. Before leaving, I have to ring 3 taxi companies before locating a driver who is either free or willing to pick me up. Once underway, the local train to Darsham charges ahead, faster and faster, through woods, pastures, low heathland, and naked and cold marshes sunken under leaden skies. Tall, tangled banks occasionally border the rails and almost encase the moving train. Removed from the vulnerability of the open fields, foxes find a safer passage along these embankments. It's heartening to catch a glimpse of one trotting, dodging, or pouncing among a confusion of brambles and weeds. After a while, the locomotive stops at Darsham, a forsaken, lonely place without an attendant. To my immense relief, my taxi is waiting in a narrow cobbled lot by the platform. Before arriving, I had been anxiously rehearsing what I might do if the driver had not shown up. There is some comfort in the thought, though, that if I had been disembarking at the station in the mid-19th century, I would have had to take a horse-drawn omnibus that trundled between here and Southwold. I would have been seated among other passengers and their luggage, as well as bags of coal. The return trip to Darsham might have been even more uncomfortable, for I would have sat in an omnibus packed with fish from Southwold Harbour and milk churns picked up along the way from local farms. Oddly, on my train journey to Darsham, I noticed that few passengers on the train seemed to display a polished appearance and be of another order. On previous trips to Cromer, Great Yarmouth, Felixstowe or Lowestoft, I had sat among the usual mixture of all sorts that lounge or slump on the train seats, snack on pop and crisps, read magazines, chatter, put their feet up, or speak loudly on their cell phones. This time, however, I am sharing a carriage with well-heeled individuals who travel with a refined self-assurance that often signals wealth. I am soon to realize that I am on my way to an upscale section of the East Anglia coast, where years ago not only admirals and naval officers had built their mansions, but also retirees from the Anglo-Indian civil service had settled and associated exclusively with their own kind. Nowadays, much of Southwold hosts the fashionable set, mainly affluent Londoners, who have purchased properties in this area so as to retreat from the wear and tear of city life. No longer taking luxury steamers or trains from London, they drive. More than half the dwellings are second homes, some are let to holidaymakers. As if signaling the community's exclusiveness, only one road goes in and out of the town. What industries had been based here have long gone. Only the Adnams Brewery, founded in 1872, remains. If I had come 14 years earlier, I might still have seen a horse and dray delivering the company's ale to the local pubs. Most notably, Southwold, like the other seaside areas on this coast, has ceased to be a bustling marine port. Because fishing no longer affords a living, the boats have vanished and the fishermen themselves are dying out, though occasionally one might catch a glimpse of an abandoned fishing vessel or the rusted cables with which it was once hauled ashore. As a silent relic of that era, the sailors' reading room survives, but as a museum displaying portraits of local fishermen, model ships, and glass cabinets packed with maritime paraphernalia. Built in 1864 with funding from a wealthy captain's widow, this small brick building was originally designed as a refuge for fishermen and mariners when not at sea. The intent was to keep these men out of the pubs and encourage them to follow Christian ideals. The rules were strict. No swearing, no gambling, no improper language or bad behavior, and of course, no beer or spirits allowed on the premises. There were even regulations about reading. No newspaper was allowed to be retained by any member longer than 10 minutes after it has been asked for. And on no account was a member permitted to take any newspaper out of the room. As a privilege, members were allowed to use the WC outside behind the caretaker's house. As if summoning ghosts, today the museum's curator still lays out daily newspapers on the table, and on Sundays brings out games such as chess and Scrabble for visitors to enjoy. On certain days, the sound of snooker balls bumping into each other resonates from a back room. The reading room carries yet another remembrance of the dead, for it is here that in the late 1970s, W.G. Sebald temporarily found refuge and rest. Listening to the muffled sound of the sea, he sat in an armchair, wrote letters, and reviewed his thoughts. During the late afternoon on the day of my arrival, while strolling in the center of town, I soon catch sight of Southwold's prosperity. Dressed in my tired clothes and by now shabby hiking boots, I find myself among stylish women who slip in and out of designer coats, deftly arrange cashmere scarves around their necks, and confidently toss designer handbags over their shoulders. The contents of London's fashionable and costly Burlington Arcade I had visited a few weeks before are on parade. I imagine that these people, in their former lives, might have patronized Southwold's once thriving, luxurious Grand Hotel, built in 1901 to accommodate wealthy guests who had arrived via the Belle steamer from London. Now demolished, this imposing structure had featured 100 rooms, electricity, radiators in every room, lifts, chandeliers, furniture from the finest shops in London, elegant soaring staircases, as well as billiard, smoking and reading rooms. Attached to its extensive estate were tennis courts, exotic and vegetable gardens, a garage with its own petrol pump, as well as accommodations for the guests, chauffeurs and servants, 1 shilling and up per day. Lap dogs were allowed in the private rooms, 1 and 6 per day. But under no circumstances are dogs permitted in public rooms. Large dogs, thought scruffy and disruptive, were absolutely forbidden. Inevitably, war got the better of this well-appointed hotel. After being used to billet soldiers in the Second World War, it fell into disuse and was eventually knocked down in 1959. Older residents of Southwold have fond childhood memories of playing inside its decaying carcass and scrambling through its rubble. Though the Grand Hotel is no more, much of the town retains a sense of privilege and certainly bears absolutely no resemblance to the failing sections of Yarmouth, Felixstowe and Lowestoft. I feel out of place in this well-to-do community that shows off freshly painted, immaculately renovated fishermen's cottages. It's been a while since a fisherman's family inhabited them. Rows of manicured mansions, what George Orwell critically termed sham picturesque villas, well-tended village greens, and all too quaint winding streets. Boutiques, trendy food shops, sophisticated restaurants, superb bakeries, and tea shops line the main street. Orwell's younger sister, Avril Blair, once ran a tea shop, the Copper Kettle, in a building next to the family's residence on Queen Street. This cafe is now a charity shop. Even upscale places have these. In the center of town, all is orderly, bright, tidy and tasteful. As if stepping out of a nostalgic picture postcard, the butcher sports his traditional, spotless, blue-striped apron. And, as if creating a work of art, the greengrocer displays his carefully selected fruits and vegetables. When I walk by his shop, I am reminded of a 19th century Punch cartoon entitled Gentility in Greens, in which a greengrocer responds to Mrs. Brown's request for cabbage by haughtily replying, "Cabbage, Mum? We don't keep no second-class vegetables, Mum. You'll get it at the lower end of the town." My sense of disquiet at finding myself in this upmarket seaside town reminds me of how much George Orwell, nay Eric Blair, had once in the 1920s and early 30s, thoroughly despised its provincialism, although I am perhaps too quick to do so. After discovering that Orwell had lived here, I find myself empathizing with his point of view as well as with his slovenly bearing, particularly since I am almost as disheveled in appearance as he reputedly was. Orwell was said to roam the streets wearing handmade suits that needed a good iron, a long scarf, and no hat. As I was to learn, he had resided here as a young man and moved back into his parents' home for several years later in the 1930s. Originally, his father and mother had come to Southwold after retiring from British colonial service in India, where Orwell's father for monitoring the production and distribution of opium across India. In 1922, they had bought Montague House, a handsome, upper-middle-class dwelling, and his father had joined not only the exclusive conservative Blythe Club, tradesmen could not belong, but the golf club as well. He was also an avid bridge player. Orwell disliked Southwold for its sneering narrow-mindedness, its upper-middle-class deportment, and its attendant attachment to British colonialism. At times, he referred to the community as an Anglo-Indian graveyard. He loathed what he called those tomb-like boarding houses with Anglo-Indians littered about in all stages of decomposition, all talking and talking about what happened in Bogley-Walla in 1818. In an early novel, A Clergyman's Daughter, published 1935, Orwell caustically mocks the respectable section of 1930s Southwold, called Knipe in the novel. He writes, "The two pivots, or foci, about which the social life of the town moved were the Knipe Hill Conservative Club, fully licensed, from whose bay windows, any time after the bar was open, the large, rosy-gilled faces of the town's elite were to be seen gazing like chubby goldfish from an aquarian pane. And Ye Old Tea Shop, a little farther down the high street, the principal rendezvous of the Knipe Hill ladies. Not to be present at Ye Old Tea Shop between 10 and 11 every morning to drink your morning coffee and spend half hour or so in the agreeable twitter of upper-middle-class voices was to be definitely out of Knipe Hall society." Thankfully, my hotel is removed from this posh neighborhood in a less pretentious part of town, a mile or so north away from the center. The Blythe, named after the river, is under repair. The window sills are still rotten, and the carpets are grubby. The hotel is definitely for those guests who are strapped for money. One guest refers to it as a cheap stay in an expensive town. The Blythe Hotel awkwardly hugs a corner opposite to where the train station had once stood. My room is small. I must squeeze my body flat in order to get between the end of the bed and a disused fireplace. The shower reluctantly offers tepid water, but I have no complaints about overcooked bacon and toilets that don't flush, comments that some disgruntled patron registered online. Dogs are welcome, even large ones that formerly would have been excluded from the Grand Hotel. These companions become the mediating object by which I can open a conversation with the other few guests. While seated at a wooden table, I meet a man who introduces himself as a sparky. He explains the word is British slang for an electrician. Another person, who has a large poodle-like hound, is an avid collector of records and CDs. When he learns that I am from Buffalo, he immediately tells me the name of the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra's conductor. Amazing. The landlord joins in. He declares that once he had worked at Random House in distribution, but had recently decided to tackle a run-down hotel instead. Also refreshing, as well as surprising. He offers me advice about where to walk. After my arrival, settling into my room and wandering through the town, I am relieved to see that there's just enough brightness lingering in the sky so that I can walk down to the sea before turning in for the night. Eager to be by the North Sea's side, I follow a mile-long avenue fringed by 1950s stolid middle-class bungalows, one after another. These might be the bungalows built on the cleared acreage after the demolition of the Grand Hotel. Behind neatly constructed low brick walls, perennial garden gnomes all too predictably stand among carefully tended flower beds or lie collapsed in perpetual rest among arrangements of decorative stones. Passing by each dwelling, I cannot resist furtively glancing in the cottage's large picture windows. No lamps are on. No one sits in the obligatory stuffed armchair or on the settee. No flame glows from a gas heater perched in a once functioning fireplace. Coal scuttles now serve as planters. Carefully arranged standing picture frames and vases, maybe an occasional piece of sculpture, line each windowsill for all to see. A conventional landscape painting hangs on the opposite wall. Each interior is strangely like the other. There must be somebody inside, but where? I wonder how confined and lonely are the lives within. The trek down to the shore seems interminable. At last, I reach the restorative sea. The thud of the waves endlessly breaking on shore and the retreating water rowdily dragging the pebbles back into the ocean soon silence and crush the depressingly negative thoughts that have been chafing my mind. The sea washes away the pettiness of the day, as well as tempers the painful sense of class and privilege that my coming to Southwold has resurrected. Refreshed and relieved, I stroll onto a vacant pier to contemplate a larger prospect. I gaze at the darkening clouds sweeping over the receding light. Shortly, these clouds will commence their descent into a jet black night. Darkness will tumble down, settle on the sea, and signal that it is time for me to turn round and retrace my steps. Before leaving, I look once more upon the heaving surf and am reminded that the sea is not always restorative, for periodically high gale winds and wrathful waves sweep over, erode, and flood the shore where I stand. On this coast, the North Sea eats away roughly a meter of land every year, so no matter how sheltered the privileged of this area think they are, remember that only one road goes in and out of Southwold, none among them can fully elude the sea's might. The same is true for days gone by. For instance, in 1862, Southwold was sadly altered, so that no more would the old fishing huts and homes of the fishermen and the neat cottages stand along the beach. As a diarist recorded, quote, "Never again will the yarn be spun at the old cottage door, nor the pipe of peace be smoked in the hut of Sam. All this is of the past. Now all is wrecked and consumed by the never-ceasing, ever unsatisfied wave. Nothing is now left between the sea and the cliff. Destruction and desolation greet you at every step." In times to come, as in the previous centuries, powerful waves will break through walls and mounds of protective stones, seep into areas vulnerable to the tidal flooding, and crumble cliffs of clay, silt, and sand. Indeed, in January 1953, gale-force northerly winds and a monstrous surge of water damaged the pier on which I am walking, destroying the arcade and carrying its slot machines away. These ruins joined the wrecks and dead holidays of days long departed and almost forgotten. This restless sea and heavy winter storms have ruined many a ship off this coast. James Maggs's 19th century Southwold diary records numerous sad accounts of vessels that have been driven onto the sands, broken apart, and washed ashore. On January the 6th, 1852, he notes that a schooner with a cargo of coal sailing from Middlesbrough to Southwold, after failing to enter the Southwold harbour because of unsettled weather, attempts to find refuge. But high winds interfere and the boat cannot get over the sandbar. As Maggs recounts, a tow line was run out to the captain on the south and a stout ward to the north pier, but every effort to get her over the bar failed. When the tide fell about noon, the wind veered to the south-southwest and increased to a gale. On the flow of the tide, the sea broke the bulwarks. At midnight, the life gun was fired from the shore and some of the crew were hauled to safety. A week later, the coal is salvaged. Maggs's diary also mentions decomposed and bloated bodies of drowned sailors silently drifting onto the sands, fishermen lost in heavy seas, as well as those who have gone out in lifeboats to rescue boats in distress.